Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're stepping into a really disturbing and complex case.
Yeah, it's quite something.
We've pieced this together from some never-before-seen YouTube footage. It's the initial police interrogation of a 15-year-old Nick Browning.
Right after the discovery of his entire family murdered. Father, mother, two younger brothers.
Happened in their home in Cockeysville, Maryland, February 2nd, 2008.
And this footage covers those crucial first hours.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
So our mission, really, in this deep dive is to look closely at those initial hours, focusing on the interrogations. Not just Nick, but his friends, too.
We're trying to trace how the story unfolded, spot the inconsistencies.
And explore the really unsettling psychological side of it all.
It's not just about the tragedy itself, but how people react right after. You see the raw behavior, the little cues.
Yeah, and how the police start trying to piece it all together from these, fragmented stories.
It's fascinating and a grim way to watch.
Yeah. So let's start at the beginning. Nick and three friends, Ryan Finglass, Taylor Tuxbury, and Alexander Smith, they get to Nick's house.
And immediately, something feels wrong.
Yeah, the door's unlocked. First thought, maybe a burglary.
But then they go inside.
And they find Nick's father, John Browning, on the sofa. He'd been shot. Dead.
Just devastating. And it didn't stop there, did it?
No. They searched further, found his mother, Tamara, and his brothers, Gregory, 13, and Benjamin, who was only 11, all murdered in their beds.
God, the shock for those kids. Teenagers finding that, it's almost unimaginable.
Truly. For anyone, really, but especially for kids that age.
So naturally, they call the police. The four boys are taken down to the station.
And immediately separated, right? Which is standard procedure.
Absolutely critical. You don't want them talking amongst themselves, potentially aligning their stories, even unintentionally. You need those raw, individual perspectives first.
Right. And it's in those separate rooms, those initial interviews, that things start getting interesting. The detectives use different tactics with each boy.
Oh, yeah. You really see that in the footage. Different approaches.
Take Ryan. The detective, Dave, he introduces himself using his first name. Tries to seem less formal.
Exactly. Standard rapport building. Make him feel a bit more comfortable, less intimidated, hoping he'll open up. The tone is, pretty conversational at first.
Like, hey, Ryan, thanks for coming in. Almost casual, considering.
Right. But then look at Taylor's interview. Big difference.
Yeah, the detective there is much more direct. Straight up tells him, look, this is a homicide. Some bad stuff has happened. I need 100% honesty.
Very blunt. Cuts right to the chase.
Why the switch, do you think? Why so direct with Taylor?
Well, Taylor looked visibly nervous in the footage, didn't he? Maybe the detective thought a direct approach would cut through the nerves, the hesitation. No ambiguity.
Yeah.
This is serious. Tell us the truth.
Okay, makes sense. And then with Alex, another shift.
Yeah, back to rapport building. Detective reassures him he's not in trouble. Asks about his dad being there. Even mentions lacrosse.
Trying to find common ground, make him feel safe.
Pretty much. Get him talking about something familiar before diving into the heavy stuff. Standard technique for younger witnesses or subjects.
And then there's Nick's interrogation. It's delayed. He's actually shown sort of maybe dozing off.
And the detective comes in almost apologetically. Hey, Nick, sorry it took so long.
But then, boom, almost straight away reads him his Miranda rights. Very casually, but it's done. And then starts questioning.
And the physical closeness, that really stood out. The detective sits right up close to Nick.
Yeah, what's the purpose of that? Invading his space.
It's a deliberate tactic. Proxemic control, sometimes called. It can create unease, subtle pressure, makes it harder to lie, potentially heightens anxiety, focuses their attention right on the interviewer.
Okay, gotcha. So let's get into what the friends actually said, because this is where the stories start to wobble.
Big time. Ryan first, his initial account.
Pretty simple. They were at the mall earlier, then went to Nick's house. Standard teenage stuff.
But then, later in the interview, the story changes.
Right. Ryan admits Nick actually left the sleepover they were having at Ryan's house around 12:30 a.m.
And Nick's excuse said he was going to take his car for a drive.
But then came back, saying he just fell asleep in the car at his own house with the lights on.
That detail, the lights being on, that becomes important later, doesn't it?
Hugely important. Now, Taylor, his story initially seems to line up with Ryan's about the sleepover.
Yeah, he mentions waking up around midnight, moving around, because Ryan's parents had people over. And at first, he says Nick was there the whole night.
But then he gets hesitant, right? You can see it.
Definitely. He starts fidgeting, touching his face. Classic signs of discomfort.
Yeah.
And eventually he admits, no, Nick wasn't there.
And he seems really nervous about saying what Nick said he was going to do.
Which was Again, take the car.
Mm-hmm.
Echoing Ryan's revised story, you can almost see him wrestling with it, loyalty versus, well, a murder investigation.
It's palpable, that internal conflict. And then Alex.
Alex initially goes along with it too. Yeah, Nick stayed the night.
But when the detective pushes back, says, hey, the other guy said he left.
Alex folds. Changes his story. Confirms Nick said he was leaving around 12:45 a.m. to get the car.
He mentions falling asleep around 1 a.m., then calling Nick much later, like 5 a.m.
And Alex adds another detail later, that Nick seemed worried the next day when they went to the house because his parents weren't answering calls.
Trying to sound concerned after the fact.
Perhaps, but the really key thing Alex adds, remember the car keys.
Oh, right. Alex says Nick actually showed them car keys at the mall earlier.
Which completely contradicts Nick's story about needing to go home to get the keys. That's a major inconsistency.
Huge. So these three friends, their stories start cracking under pressure, especially around Nick's movements.
Yeah, the detectives are good at using those cracks. Pointing out, well, Alex said this, but you said that, creates that cognitive dissonance, makes it harder to stick to a lie.
Okay, so let's turn to Nick himself, his initial version of events.
He says, came home from school, basketball game, then Ryan's for the sleepover. Standard enough.
He does admit going back to his house around 1:30 a.m., but only to get the car.
Right, but then he claims he didn't go inside because the lights were on, so he just sat in the car and fell asleep.
Until Alex called him around 5 a.m. That's his story.
But there are immediate red flags, aren't there? His whole demeanor, for one.
Yeah, the analysis points out he seems weirdly casual, unemotional, considering his family was just found murdered. He even, laughs with the detective at one point.
That flat effect.
Yeah.
It could be shock, sure. A defense mechanism. Or something else. Something investigators would definitely clock.
It's unsettling. And then there's the part about him calling home that morning.
Says he was worried because his mom hadn't called him about cleaning the house at 9 a.m., like usual.
Trying to show concern again. But it doesn't quite fit, does it? If you're that worried and you live nearby.
Wouldn't you just go over there, pop over and check, not just keep calling?
Exactly. The action, or lack of it, doesn't match the supposed worry. Feels off.
Very off. Plus, his timeline is shaky. Leaving Ryan's at 1:30 a.m., arriving home around 3 a.m., doesn't match the friends' times.
And then the little details he lets slip.
Like knowing about the gun locker in the basement and the types of guns his dad owned. Shows familiarity.
And the big one admitting he told his little brother.
To leave the back basement door unlocked so he could get in later. To get the car, supposedly.
That suggests planning, doesn't it? An intention to get into the house quietly, secretly.
Definitely raises suspicion, especially since he initially tried to hide that part.
So the detectives start pressing him on all this, right? The inconsistencies, the casual behavior.
Yeah, the tone shifts. Less rapport, more challenge. They remind him it's a murder investigation. Lying is serious.
And the moment Alex reveals Nick told his brother to leave the door unlocked, that's huge.
Because it blows up Nick's story about the light stopping him from going inside.
And Taylor, who first denied knowing about the call, eventually confirms it too.
So Nick is cornered on that point. He has to admit it. Yeah, I asked my brother to leave the door unlocked.
Still claiming it was just to get the car, but it's a crack.
A big one.
A crucial admission. It shows premeditation to enter the house unconventionally. And it shows he was lying earlier about why he didn't go in.
Then comes the hammer blow from the detectives.
They reveal what they found.
The keys. The keys to the gun lockers found under Nick's mattress.
Can't explain that away easily.
And they pair it with no sign of forced entry anywhere in the house.
The scene doesn't look like a break-in.
And the missing gun. A 9mm. The exact type Nick's father owned.
So they lay it all out. The keys, no forced entry, the specific missing gun.
And then they just ask him, or rather accuse him directly. You killed your family, didn't you, Nick?
That's a moment of intense confrontation. All the evidence laid bare.
How does he react?
He denies it, initially. But the denials are weak, apparently. He struggles. How are the keys under his mattress? Why no forced entry?
He mentions his parents being strict, maybe hinting at a motive, but still denies anything major enough to do that. But you see the casual act crumbling. He's under immense pressure now. The evidence is just too strong.
His inability to explain those keys is a major sticking point.
It really is. It's physical evidence linking him directly in his own private space to the means.
And then, after hours of this, the pressure, the evidence.
He confesses.
Just like that.
Well, after prolonged questioning, he breaks, and he describes it.
Chillingly, right. Going home, supposedly for the car, Sees his dad asleep on the couch, sees the gun on the workbench.
And he admits
Hmm.
he stood there over his father for about half an hour.
Half an hour, just standing there, deciding.
That's what he said, wavering. Then he shot him.
That hesitation makes it almost worse somehow. Not impulsive.
It suggests a period of contemplation before the act. Then he described going upstairs, shooting his sleeping mother, then his brothers. Quickly, he said.
The lack of emotion, initially when recounting it.
It's deeply disturbing, raises so many questions about his state of mind.
And he didn't just kill them, he tried to cover it up.
Yeah, admitted staging the scene to look like a burglary. Opened a jewelry case, moved the Xbox.
Calculated.
Very. And he told them where he ditched the gun Shawan Road.
Did he show any remorse at that point?
He eventually acknowledged it was wrong, apparently showed some emotion, but it's noted as being limited, especially at first. The calculated staging really speaks volumes about his mindset.
Unbelievable for a 15-year-old.
The level of planning, the coldness, it's hard to comprehend.
So obviously after the confession, he's arrested. 4 counts of first-degree murder.
The legal process starts. But then there's that unexpected twist with the family.
Right. Later on, some family members actually wrote letters asking for leniency, including his grandfather.
His maternal grandfather, yeah, who also corroborated some claims Nick apparently made about abuse within the family.
That adds another layer, doesn't it? Doesn't excuse it, obviously, but complexity.
Absolutely. It suggests potentially deep-seated issues within the family dynamic. It's a reminder these things are rarely simple, even when the act itself is horrific.
Yeah.
But legally, the focus remained on the murders.
And in the end,
He took a plea deal, pleaded guilty to all 4 counts.
10 cents.
4 life sentences, but with 2 of them running consecutively,
Meaning?
meaning he has to finish one before the next one starts. Makes parole much harder to achieve. He becomes technically eligible in 2031.
Eligible, but likely.
That's the key thing. In Maryland, getting parole on a life sentence requires the governor's approval. And historically, that's been very, very rare.
So eligibility on paper doesn't mean freedom in reality.
Pretty much. It's a very high bar to clear. Underscores the severity of what he did.
Okay, so wrapping this up, this deep dive into just those initial hours, the interrogation footage, what are the big takeaways?
Well, we saw the story unravel through inconsistencies. Nick's, his friends.
We saw the detectives using specific different techniques for each person.
Yeah, trying to get to the truth. And ultimately, we saw Nick's lies fall apart under the weight of evidence, leading to that chilling confession.
The lack of initial remorse, the staging, it paints a really grim picture.
It really does. And it leaves you with so many questions about motive, about how a teenager could do this, the impact on everyone left behind.
It's a case that really sticks with you. Makes you think about guilt, innocence, how police questioning works.
And the factors that can lead to such unbelievable violence. If people wanted to dig deeper, looking into the psychological evaluations or more on those abuse allegations.
Or just the ongoing debate about his guilt and that remote parole chance.
Yeah, it's a truly stark reminder, isn't it, of the darkness that can hide beneath the surface.
And how crucial, careful investigation is to uncover these awful truths.